Good afternoon. I'm excited to talk about a very important topic with Michelle of Waiting Warriors. We're talking about reintegration after deployment, which is exciting but can also be hard. So let me see if I can try to get Michelle on. Well, Michelle, thanks so much for joining us. Michelle is coming to us all the way from Hawaii. So, guys, when she's like inside with us, she is missing the beauty outside.
True.
So that's extra special. How do you manage to get Hawaii? Like that was always one of the ones we wanted.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's luck of the draw for my husband.
Okay.
It's a very he's in like a very specialized position, and it's not one that really everybody wants. So he job wise, he's taking a hit for us
Okay.
to be here.
Okay. Well, tell
Like,
your husband I said good job. Because you really are getting the whole benefit of the military experience, getting to live a super cool place like that.
yeah.
We always wanted to do Europe or Alaska or Hawaii, and we never got any of those, but I do think it was still a great adventure. But I do think like it's just such a life broadening experience when you're forced to live these places that maybe you would never live. But probably when you get to go to Hawaii, that's not a forced. I would not imagine.
It's not too bad. There's definite obvious pros. There are
Yeah.
cons to it, but
Super expensive. I know that.
yeah.
And very far
It's
from family.
far from family, it's expensive. Culturally, it's different. Not like that it's bad, but it just there's adjusting there.
Well, I mean, come on. We
But
can even say that for the 48 continental US
yeah,
because you know, we have all kinds of different dialects and cultures even within.
Well, I'm from the West Coast, so I'm from California. So in a lot of ways, and I grew up with a lot of Polynesians. So a lot of ways, this is more similar than the South was for me. Like the South was very different.
Yeah.
Just how they do things and how they talk. But then it's been funny, like I went from the West Coast. We lived in the South for a really long time, and now we're coming here. So it's
okay. So it's like all over the place. Well, it's good. It's making you more well-rounded.
Yes, it is.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I'll just give a little intro to you. You're an outdoor lover. You have 4 girls on earth, 1 in heaven. You're an Army wife, and you saw a need as you started doing your podcast, Waiting Warriors, about understanding reintegration, and you interviewed over 100 people, and you had all this information. And you're like, hey, I should maybe like put this out there for a resource. So that's called Bulletproof Your Reintegration. And it is Michelle's guide that she created, not just on her own information, which she does have firsthand experience, but also interviewing 100 military loved ones, and for her podcast and putting together this great content. And so I was really excited to meet Michelle via social media, and really excited about how she could come on and just share some of this information. First of all, tell us the name of your website, because I want to make sure people get that so they can go if they want to find out more about Bulletproof Your Reintegration. That's a mouthful.
I know, right? Even just the word reintegration, I think it's a mouthful. But it's just the waitingwarriors.com. There's a handful of different resources there, but you'll be able to find the reintegration there super easy too.
Great. So I looked over, it's a ton of information, and I had a really hard time narrowing it down because I felt like I could have interviewed you for a couple hours, and we're only doing 15 minutes. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, could you just give me 3 things that you found that are something to expect during the reintegration phase? And the reason I want to talk about this is because I know from my husband's deployments, initially you just think it's going to be like wedded bliss and all romance and all excitement, and then you actually do it and you're like, oh, that wasn't what I expected. It can have parts of that, but it's also learning to live with someone again. But you're the expert, so just tell me 3 things what you can expect during reintegration.
Yeah. So the first thing I thought of with like before they're coming home, expect for yourself to have mixed emotions. Like
Yes.
you just said, like I think as you become a military spouse or you see all these videos, you think, oh my goodness, I am just going to be so happy when my service member comes home. And you are. But there also is things like, you're maybe a little bit nervous because you have figured out a good routine and you've
Yes.
figured something out for yourself that's really healthy. And you're like,
Yes.
oh, how are they gonna
Yes.
fit into that?
Mm-hmm.
And do I have to totally give
Right.
that up, or are we gonna be able to merge that? Or like, I mean, it's not like TMI, but very personal. Like, I've had times where my husband left and came home, and I was like about to pop a baby out. So physically, my body's very different. Similar thing happened where I had given birth to a baby, and so you're like just as a woman in a weird postpartum phase. And so it can be a little bit like, oh, I'm excited for them to come home. But now all of a sudden, body
Yeah.
whatever can come over.
Body
And that's,
image. Yeah.
yeah, body image. And so it can just be a whole slew of
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And my biggest advice to remind people is like different and seemingly opposing thoughts and emotions can coexist
Yeah.
and they don't have to negate
Yes.
each other. And if you can
Absolutely.
just give yourself space to feel all of that and not judge
Yeah.
yourself and
Yeah.
understand that you are completely normal and every other military spouse has or is going through something very, very similar, it helps you just kind of process the whole thing a lot
Great.
better. The other thing I thought of was for like homecoming day, I was not properly prepared, and I've heard from many other military spouses, I was not properly prepared for homecoming day for him to work as much as he worked. I thought, again, you see the videos, they walk through the oh, what's the door, like those big airliner doors,
Yeah.
and you run and you hug, and it's just like they're home and they are yours. I was not expecting my husband to like give us these hugs and we join together as a family and then him have to go away for a few hours. So
Yeah.
it has been different depending on the job and
Yeah.
the time away, but maybe just prepare yourself for like, okay, I may be waking up at 4 a.m. to go and greet him, and then I might have to come back and pick him up at 3 p.m. that day. Or he does get to come home immediately after, but he's got to show up at 6 a.m. the next day, and just
Yeah.
kind of give yourself.
Or he's just exhausted from jet lag
Yeah.
and travel.
Yeah. Yeah. So just expecting to not know what to expect. And I know, like, I kind of hate the term flexible because
Yeah.
we are asked to be that so much, but just,
Don't we do that all the
yeah.
time?
And it can get so frustrating because
Yeah.
why are you always the one who has to be flexible? But just, I think it's helpful to maybe have the expectation that they're gonna have to turn in some gear.
Yeah.
If they're over anybody else, they're gonna have to make sure they do
Mm-hmm.
all their stuff, and they're gonna have to get some kind of briefing about safety and about all this
Right.
kind of stuff. So just expect that kind of time.
Yeah, that's great
The,
advice.
the other thing I thought for expecting, particularly after they've been home for some time, is a lot of spouses aren't expecting and kind of have a hard time with their service member wrestling with some feelings of missing the
Yeah.
deployment or wanting to go back. And my biggest advice, and why I want to talk about this with people so they know to expect
Yeah.
it, is because that actually doesn't mean anything about you or the family or their desire to be
Yeah.
with you guys. It simply comes from a serviceable heart. They know that there's a job that has to be done, especially if they still have friends over there. They want to be there
Mm-hmm.
with their brothers and sisters because that bond is unlike anything else in any other community. But also the experience of a deployment, sometimes it's not always like this, but it can be a really um, healthy place for a service member because they're doing the job that they are
Right.
training to do.
It's very
Yeah.
fulfilling. Right.
Yeah.
And all that training goes into a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of being home and pretending to do the thing that is your job, you're really doing your job. And especially if you have a good group and other service members that they're working towards, like there's just nothing like that. So give them space.
I appreciate
Don't
how
take that
understanding
personally.
you are about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not easy. I don't want to like be conveying this as like,
Yeah.
my husband said it to me and I was perfectly fine with it. Like it can seem, it can take time to process, but I think if you expect it to happen, it's not as jarring or as shocking, and you can give yourself grace and you can give them grace and eventually get to a peaceful understanding with it.
Yeah, well, it's just like it's a major adjustment.
Yeah.
It's probably almost as drastic of an adjustment when we PCS, right?
Yes.
I can't relate
Well,
to
they
dealing
are
with women coming back.
PCSing.
Right.
They
But you
are.
know how like when you PCS, and you show up and you haven't gotten in your groove yet and you miss
Yeah.
your friends from the old
Yeah.
assignment, but you're where you're at and you know that God has something for you at that assignment, right?
Yeah.
And probably like even for us a little bit, like I know I got really used to like wearing super comfy clothes and maybe not doing a lot of makeup and not having to cook.
Yeah.
Because that's what, when my husband would deploy, I would say, you know what? We're doing like mac and cheese as much as
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah.
And so like you're super thrilled to have them at home, but if I'm honest, I can't be as selfish with my time when my husband's home.
Yeah.
Mac and
Yeah.
cheese is not going to cut it for him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So, all right. Well, that is really great information, Michelle. Let's go on. I wanted to ask, what's a tip that involves action? Like something someone can do for somebody that's about to reintegrate or is amid reintegration.
Yeah. I'm looking over my notes because it was so okay. So the thing that I thought of for this was something that I see skipped over the most, probably because it's like, why would I do this? Because it's just so simple, but an action that you really need to take is writing down who your support is, who your service member support is, and what are the boundaries or the lines which you feel like you or your service member or together in your relationship should go and get that support. Because let me tell you what, reintegration, like you can adore your service member like nobody's business. My husband is my person. I live and
You
breathe
married that.
and love him so dearly. But there is stress and tension that comes with two people coming back together and living with each other, right? Like and there are adjustments, especially since it's two people who have grown and changed, and now you're really rebuilding your marriage
You've
and your
got to change,
relationship.
and so have your
Yes,
kids if you have kids.
yes. And that adds like a whole nother thing. And there's no amount of love that can just take and clear out the adjustments and just that tension with figuring it out. And so, with that means that there are going to be things where there are going to be moments where you are going to have to grow even more, and you are going to be challenged, and your marriage is going to be challenged, and your service member is going to be challenged. And if they have any kind of combat related stress or PTSD, you need to know what those signs are, and you need to know who their chaplain is, who their behavior health.
Great. That's a great tip.
What's the word? Like I think it's a different word for every branch, but like who the behavior health specialist for their unit is, who is a friend, or like who is their sergeant that they trust, that they feel like they can go talk to, so that if they are feeling any of these kind of things that go past the line of just short temper and having a reaction and then being able to apologize for it, like know where that line is and who they can go talk to. And then also for yourself, recognize what fatigue is and what uh oh, there was a word and I did, but it's like, but what the fatigue signs are, and recognizing if you are just really way too irritable and you need to go talk to
You
somebody.
probably need a
Or
timeout too.
yes. Yeah.
I
Timeouts
actually put
are so
myself in
good.
timeout.
Yeah, timeouts are super good. But just if you can have that, like if you actually write it down, it's very, very helpful if you do that, because then when you're in the moments,
Yeah.
you can look at it more objectively versus with a chaos. Like, I mean, when I am flustered, my brain feels like mush.
Yeah.
So that's not helpful for me to make those kind
Well,
of
and
decisions.
if you were to say to your military member, yeah, hey, you might need to talk to somebody in a moment of conflict, that's not going to go
Yeah.
really well. So this
Yeah.
is a great idea while you're waiting for your member to come home.
Yeah.
Maybe
Talk
even
about it.
early on in the deployment, go ahead and
Mhm.
start having these conversations. You can have these conversations on video call. You can email them. I know we
Mhm.
always use email way more during deployment than we do
Yeah.
non-deployment,
Yeah.
to kind of have some difficult conversations about this. So yeah, those are great advice. And then I would say I'm a huge proponent of counseling,
Yes.
for military families. I think that the military life is awesome and wonderful, but it's also really hard.
Mhm.
And we made it 25 years, but we didn't do it without needing counseling. And I needed it a little bit more at
Yeah.
times, right? The military life was just hard for me at times, and we moved 14
Yeah.
times. And then also our kids needed help, at times. And so I really, even when my husband, was in command, we would openly tell people, hey, our family's used counseling, because we felt like we needed to be vulnerable to let people know, like, this is a good life and it builds incredible character, but it is a hard life.
Yeah. And one of the quotes I use in the course is from a lieutenant colonel. So I love like pointing out he's a lieutenant colonel and he's saying this. He's just saying getting help doesn't mean that you aren't capable or fit or strong. It just means you simply do not know and naturally obtain the tools to process and
Yeah,
handle this particular moment. That does not mean that once you have the tools, you won't be able to take it off and you'll be super successful. It
right.
just means you got to go learn the tools, and that's all it means.
Hmm.
It doesn't
Right.
have
It
to be
doesn't
a
mean you're
huge
weak.
thing.
It doesn't mean you're
Yeah,
wrong. It just means you're going through something that a
yeah,
lot of people don't have to go through these things that we have to go through. And there are people who, have gotten, lots of degrees specializing in this, who have tools to put in our toolbox that we can
yeah.
use. Yeah, I love that you said that. Okay, we're already over on time, but I know you have a bunch of great discussions.
Hmm.
You have a lead magnet, which is like a freebie on your website that you can go, and it gives you questions for yourself,
Hmm.
questions for your military member, to answer while you're on deployment. So I know you have a lot of them, and I'm asking you, can you just name like two of the really good questions? And then tell us where to go get that resource, because I really want people to go get it.
Yes. Okay, so two questions. One of my favorite ones for myself to ask and for all the other spouses is, hey, what are your expectations for the first few weeks?
Yes, that's
Now, you
a great
don't
one.
just say that, because 9 times out of 10, and I've had many military spouses message me and be like, they just, like, the answer's bland. You got to remember who you're talking to. Ask specifically, like, okay, when it comes to our time together, what are you expecting? When it
Yes,
comes to household responsibilities, you need to have the conversation on what they're expecting, what you're expecting.
yes.
When you're thinking about
The
personal
kids.
space and
Yeah.
time, if kids are involved, there's a whole other questions. And then when it comes to social activities, are they wanting to come home and they're wanting to be super social, or are they needing some time to decompress? And
Yeah, that's
while you may want to
something
go
I
out and
learned. The
party,
homecoming party is not always a good
yeah.
idea.
Yes. Yeah. So just having that conversation. Um, and then, ooh, which one should I pick? Mm,
Sorry, I shortened it on you
I
because
know.
you've given
No, it
such great
was
information.
good. The other one I think is like, I think you need to talk about how you can support each other through the emotional and psychological kind of impacts of reintegration. And I know those are big words that's probably not how you're going to talk to each other about it, but like you need to talk about how this is a big transition. And you need to make sure that your service member understands that this is a big transition for you, even though you didn't go. This is still a big change. And then talk to each other about how, like, have we been able to work well through big stressful moments before, or do we need to go learn from like John Gottman, who is a marriage and family like guru. They've done a ton of studies and learn kind of more effective communication skills. Do we need to what are things that you can do for me when I am struggling? What can I do for you when you're struggling? Those kind of things of how are we going to support each other and do this hard thing together without kind of turning against each other.
Realizing that each other is not the enemy.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I want to encourage you guys to go check out Waiting Warriors, which is Michelle's website. Again, she has this great resource, which I don't even know how many, but it was pages of questions, and I just thought it was fantastic. So you can go, you can get that information, and you can also get her bulletproof, your reintegration guide, and that is something that you have to pay for, but it's well worth it. Yes, very affordable and well worth making the investment. Well, Michelle, I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and I will tag you, and then that way you can share it to your page too.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks so much. You too. Bye.
Bye.